Hello and welcome to iHeart Cooking. I'm registered dietitian Jennifer Stachler.
And I'm Chef Dugan Wetzel.
We are both from Reid Health. Today's program is brought to you by Reid Health Community Benefits, WCTV, and RPNL.
On today's show, we're going to be talking about warming up with Hearty Soups.
Cooking, like we said, we're going to be warming up with some hearty soups. We're in the middle of winter. We want something warm, nice, fuzzy. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. So the first recipe we're actually going to get into, because we're hoping to get 2 soups made for you, is the spring chicken and barley soup. So we're going to be talking about some barley and chicken here.
Absolutely. First thing you're going to do is you're going to turn your pan on, get it medium-high heat, probably would be sufficient enough. You're going to add a little bit of oil to coat the bottom of the pan, maybe a tablespoon max, and just kind of let that warm up. You're going to start smelling the oils. We're using an olive oil, so you're going to get that fragrant olive flavor. Once you start smelling it, then we can start adding our onions and our celery and our garlic. So maybe take about a minute here.
And like I kind of said in past episodes, this is one of my favorite parts of cooking in the kitchen because of the smell. Once the oil warms up, you get those onions, celery. It's one of my favorite smells.
Absolutely.
Actually, yeah. At least in the kitchen.
We're ready.
All right, so we have our olive oil in our pan. It is now ready to go. You do want to make sure it's warm or kind of heated up before you actually start putting things in it because it's going to quicken up that process.
Absolutely. Your onions won't get saturated. It keeps the flavor and moisture in there. So you hear it's already sizzling, so you know it's good and hot. First thing we're doing, we're going to add our onions and our celery and kind of cook those maybe 2 minutes, soften them up a little bit, let them release their flavor, and then we'll add a little bit of diced garlic to it.
One of the reasons you don't want to add the garlic right away with this is because these are, well, they're cut into larger pieces. So the cooking time for them is going to be a little bit longer versus the garlic so small that if you'd add it now, it's going to burn very easily.
Absolutely.
And like we kind of mentioned in the past, the onions, the celery, the garlic, good aromas that you're getting from the actual cooking of this makes your kitchen smell great, but it gives you so much flavor that you don't have to be adding the salt to these dishes because this is what's going to drive that flavor in them.
Okay. So our onions are starting to become transparent, so that means we're about there. Going to go ahead and add our garlic. Just toss it to incorporate and let it cook for another couple minutes.
And as you'll see for most soup dishes that you do make, this is kind of the base to start a lot of soup.
Absolutely.
It has all the components, again, for that flavor aspect, but also it gives you those extra vegetables and things in the dishes to add more of a nutrition component.
So we're going to let that go for about another minute here. Then we're going to add our chicken broth, our chicken itself, and our barley.
So like we said, this is a chicken and barley soup. So one big nutrition component of this is going to be that barley. It's going to add a lot of fiber to this dish. And that's something that having extra fiber in your diet can help keep with heart healthy, keep you kind of regulated, helps with lowering of cholesterol. So a lot of heart benefits there in just the barley itself.
Just adding our low-sodium chicken broth here. You can find that at any local store. It's pretty popular now. We're using a bone-in chicken thigh. I personally like using bone-in because the bone gives it a little bit more flavor, and you can always pluck it off the bone, pull it apart. That way it's not there. I'm actually going to put another glove on real quick. What we want to use is a skinless chicken breast. We don't need that skin, and especially with making a soup, you're not going to be frying it or anything like that, so it's not going to get crispy. It's going to stay really soggy and just not be very appealing. It's going to have kind of the fats are going to release, so you don't really need it. So all I'm going to do is just tear it off real quick, and as you can see, really simple. It's just a plain chicken breast. So I'm Going to go ahead and add that in there, and the final ingredient is our barley.
Now that we've added that chicken and the barley, it is going to take some time to cook. So barley itself takes anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to actually cook through, and also that'll give it time for that chicken to cook through. So that's something, we are using more of a pearl barley. There are different types of barleys that you can find available, but that's something that this will kind of cook quicken that, or said that there's a difference between barleys that you can buy. So like we mentioned, we have pearl barley that is actually in this dish, and that's something that's going to take a while to cook, anywhere from about that 20 to 30 minutes. And like Dugan's kind of mentioned in the past, it's very similar to rice, correct?
Yeah, an arborio rice, which is kind of what you see in your thicker rice, your risottos. It absorbs a little more moisture than a regular medium or long grain rice would. Typically what I like to say is a 3-to-1 ratio, where if you do 1 cup of the barley, you can add 3 cups of liquid. That's how much it'll absorb, whereas regular rice will be a 2-to-1 ratio. So gives it a little bit more texture, gives it a nice chew to it, and to go with the flavor that it brings to the dish. So.
And when you have those rices and the barleys and soups like that, you do think, again, winter, because it's more like that thicker soup, stew kind of feel to it, which makes it more of that hearty winter kind of feel. So this is going to take a while to actually cook. So you probably do want to put it on medium-high to actually get it simmering, so it actually cooks through and takes about that 20 to 30 minutes. And that can vary depending on your stove top. Every stove's a little bit different with that heating aspect. So while that actually is going to be warming up to a simmer, we're actually going to move over to the next soup recipe so we can start working on that as well, since that's going to take a little bit of time. So the other one we're going to do is a basic tomato soup. Who doesn't think of tomato soup and warm, hearty kind of flavors, and with the grilled cheese aspect as well to that. Nice thing about tomato soup, very heart healthy, very nutritious in general. So we'll get started making that soup as well. So we're going to get started with that tomato soup. We turned on the heat for it, and we're going to basically kind of like what we started with the chicken and the barley soup.
Yeah, this time we're going to add just a little bit of a butter. Again, no more than a tablespoon is all you need. It's going to give you that texture on your tongue and in your palate, the nice soft texture that goes with, any tomato soup, especially with we're going to use half and half, but the normal traditional is kind of a heavy cream based bisque. So going a little lighter, a little more healthy. Health
aspect there to it. Less saturated fats, less calories, which again, heart health, weight management, all of those fun things can help with that when we're kind of using things that are half and half versus whole milk. Also with the butter, I would recommend using unsalted butter. That's something that the sodium you find in butter is not really going to add that much flavor, and you're not going to notice that big of difference. And as of past episodes, if you've watched, we don't use a lot of salt because we're finding it already in some of the products that we cook with that we don't have to add more. And having less salt can help with fluid retention, hypertension, heart disease, weight loss. All of those things can be connected to having lower sodium meals.
Absolutely. So we're just going to test it real quick. The butter's completely melted, but I want to make sure that it's hot enough. Just throw a couple in there. And as you can see, we're not quite sizzling yet. So we're almost there, maybe another 30 seconds to a minute, and we'll be ready to go.
So like this soup, the barley and chicken one, we're doing the same thing, but instead of having oil, you're having the butter, and we're adding celery, and we're adding onions.
Absolutely.
So like we said, a very component of many soups that are available to make.
All right. So again, we're just going to kind of toss it around and incorporate it. Let that butter kind of coat the celery and the onions. Not going to take very long, again, maybe 2 minutes to let it kind of start becoming transparent and translucent, excuse me, and then we'll move on. Okay, so our onions are starting to become transparent, so we're going to add a little bit of thyme and garlic. And again, just kind of let that cook, let the garlic be heated through, let the thyme kind of get that aroma out. You can already start smelling it, which is really nice flavor, especially with the tomato-based products. So.
Absolutely. only take about 1 to 2 minutes once you add that garlic in. It's not going to take long at all.
Okay, so now we're ready. We're going to go ahead and add our tomatoes. We're using a 28-ounce can and a 14-ounce can of no salt added whole tomatoes. So be careful while you're doing this, because you are putting the juice in there as well. So if you just do it nice and slow, it shouldn't jump up and hit you or splash all over your counters or your stovetop. So,
which is something I've done before, where you went to put this in there and all of a sudden you're cleaning up and you see red spots everywhere. So yeah, definitely take your time, especially when you're putting it into that hot butter with all the other vegetables. You don't want to burn yourself at the same time. Some nutrition information about tomatoes. One nice thing, they're very low in calories, very low in carbs. Also, they have that nice red pigment, which is called lycopene, which is actually an antioxidant, which can help with fighting free radicals, which can help with heart disease and also certain types of cancer. So a lot of nutrition that is in that, just the tomato itself. But that's something we'll kind of let that cook through and cook down a little bit.
We're actually, tomatoes, we're going to let them kind of incorporate with the celery and the onion. Then we're going to put in some broth. Actually, we're using vegetable broth here, so that we can keep it a vegetarian
Absolutely.
meal. Yeah.
That's something you could easily put chicken broth in it as well. Yeah. But if you do want to keep it kind of vegetarian, keep to the vegetable broth.
Absolutely, yeah.
And kind of while that's cooking down, kind of talking about broths, you can buy them in the store. When you do buy them, you do want to try to find the lowest sodium kind of broth that you can find. Again, you have those extra health benefits there, and plus a lot of broths out there can be very high in salt amounts. So that's something that we don't really need that extra. If you want to kind of get rid of the salt completely, you can make your own. And that's something that what I like to do is on days that I know I have a couple of hours, it's winter time, most of the time in the winter time, our houses are dry, staticky. So what I like to do is I like to make broth, because while it's kind of simmering and it's putting moisture into the air, and so I'm kind of getting moisture into the house, helping with that dryness, and I'm making broth at the same time, and the house smells great. So a lot of different things that you can kind of do with that.
So we're going to just add 4 cups of the vegetable broth here. You're going to turn it up to high heat, get it to a nice quick boil, and then you're just going to turn it down to a simmer, let it stew for about 10-15 minutes, and then we're almost done. So.
Yeah. One nice thing about tomato soup is it is a quicker soup than maybe this barley, or if you had something that has rice in it, because that has to cook a little bit longer. So once this is warmed through and kind of cooked through, it goes very quickly.
Absolutely.
So now the tomato soup is simmering through. We're going to kind of pop back to our chicken and barley soup, because we have an important step we want to kind of do before we finish this out.
Absolutely. All we're doing, we're taking the chicken thigh out. We're going to sit it on a cutting board here, let it kind of cool off a little bit before you start cutting it off the bone. We're doing that because it's still going to take about 10 or 15 minutes to let that barley completely cook through and absorb as much of the liquid as it can. So real quick, yeah, just kind of stops the chicken from drying out, and just an important step. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So as you can see, Dugan's kind of cutting up the chicken there. The soup itself can call for a couple chicken thighs. You can actually put as much as you kind of want in there a little bit, depending on how thick you want it and how much protein you want to put into that. The nice thing about cooking it in the broth like this with the barley is that you don't have to have a separate pan to cook that chicken, and then you're not adding extra calories by adding oils, you're not frying it, you're actually kind of just cooking it with this. So it's saving a step, it's saving dishes, and it's saving calories at the same time versus cooking it on a different saute pan.
Okay, so our barley is completely cooked through now. We're going to go ahead and add some more ingredients. We're actually going to take the chicken and put the chicken back in. Going to add some frozen peas, some diced tomatoes.
And you can use the can again, try to get the low sodium or no salt added.
Absolutely. And the asparagus. Now what we're going to do is kind of stir it up, incorporate it, let it go for 5 minutes until the asparagus is completely cooked through, and then we'll finish off the dish with a little basil, some orange zest, and some pepper.
The nice thing about adding the tomatoes, the peas, and the asparagus, you get some color into the dish. So it looks a little more pretty, I should say, versus that barley, the broth, the chicken was very bland. So again, that's what you're kind of looking in tomatoes, kind of with the tomato soup. It has that red pigment, that lycopene in there, again, an antioxidant that you can have for heart health. Also, you're adding peas. Peas are adding it's a starchy vegetable. There's nothing wrong with them. They just contain a little bit more carbohydrates in there, but very nutritious at the same time. And you're also adding asparagus, which is a non-starchy vegetable, so you got one of those that are going to have less carbohydrates in there, in case you are counting carbs for this dish. One interesting fact, you can use for asparagus, you can use frozen or fresh. But asparagus comes in other colors besides just green. You can actually find purple and white asparagus.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
not as commonly as you won't find them in the stores as commonly around here. More around springtime, you'll see the asparagus out and about. You might see some of the other colors, but the most common is the green color. So we're going to wrap these soups up. So we're going to go back to this tomato soup. It's done simmering, so we're actually going to do the next couple of steps here.
Pulling it off the heat, because you're actually going to use an immersion blender to kind of make it that tomato soup that you're so used to seeing. Something else that you can do using just an at-home blender, you can do that as well. Make sure you don't fill it more than halfway up, though, because since it is a really hot soup, once you turn it on, it's going to go everywhere. You want to make sure the lid's on tight to puree it. So real fast, just sticking the immersion blender in there and turning it on.
One thing about the immersion blender, if you like a soup, especially tomato soup, more chunkier, I know growing up and making tomato soup, my dad said, don't puree it, I like it chunky. So it's, again, preference for yourself that you don't actually have to blend it. But if more traditional soups, especially tomato, you see it's more blended kind of feel. But you don't have to do that step. You can leave it chunky at the same time.
Absolutely. So now just to finish it off, like I said earlier, the traditional tomato soup, you use heavy cream to make it that kind of rich flavor to it.
Absolutely.
We're actually changing that. We're going to use a half and half instead. So adding just maybe a half cup of half and half to it, kind of stirring it up, making sure that it's incorporated. It's going to get a little lighter in color. And then to finish it off, just taking a little bit of pepper and putting it in there. And you can put as much or as little as you want. It really depends on what your taste buds are. Yeah.
And that's something too. If you don't want to add any kind of dairy, like half and half, or milk products to that, you don't really have to. That's something that would lessen the amount of saturated fats and calories that you're getting associated with it, which is going to help with weight management and also heart health. But if you want that creaminess, like Dugan said before, most tomato soups have that kind of base of milk in there. You can add it. You can just use that half and half for less calories and less saturated fats.
Absolutely.
So now that we have this tomato soup finished, we're actually going to finish the spring chicken and barley soup. So we're going to add a little pepper to taste and a little bit of basil as well. And that's something you can use dried basil, you can use fresh basil, you could use either one. Just be aware if you do use dried herbs, you're not going to use as much of them as you would use fresh herbs because it has a stronger flavor to them. And then to top it all off, you can see Dugan here has an orange.
We're just going to add a little bit of an acid to it to kind of balance out the flavors. So really simple, maybe a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons. Just use a microplane. Most of your cheese graters at home will have a microplane part to it. And you just kind of lightly take your fruit and rub it against it. Now with most fruit, it's going to be wet, so it's going to stick to the microplane here. You just take your finger and run it across there and kind of just add it to your soup. It'll work just fine.
It gives it that little sweet flavor to it. And and also that citrus smell to the kitchen. So now that we got all the ingredients incorporated in this soup, both soups are done, and we're going to get ready to try them. These soups, and we got the chicken and barley soup. We're going to kind of let you know what we think. The nice thing about this, even though it has that barley in it, it's still more of a light flavor. It's something that's not a very heavy soup, and you're getting a lot of that kind of background of the chicken broth, but yet you're getting the vegetables and also that or basil taste. The
acidity of the tomatoes, what I really like about it, you kind of get a hint of the orange, but the tomatoes really the different flavor in all of the earthy flavors in there. So
absolutely, so very nice dish, but again, not as hearty as what you're kind of thinking when you think of the barley. And then we also have this tomato soup. You can tell since we added the half and half, it has that creaminess to it, a lot of flavor. And again, remember, we didn't add salt to either of these, but yet they're packed with flavors that you have with them. A lot of that onion and garlic is sticking out, and also that, the tomato, because it's a tomato soup. So
certainly,
obviously. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you're able to warm up with these hearty soups that we provided, and we also hope you enjoyed all the information.
For more heart-healthy recipes, you can visit Reid Health's website at reidhealth.com/iheartcooking.org.
We'll see you next month.